This lesson discusses configuring Apache. The topics include: why would you want to configure Apache? How do you configure Apache? What are the most important parameters to configure? What is a virtual host, and why would you use it? And finally, how do you configure a virtual host? First of all, why would you want to configure Apache? You need to configure Apache if you need to make adjustments to suit other software that's running on your system. You might also want to configure Apache if you want to add what are called virtual host definitions. In order to configure Apache, you would locate the Apache folder, which is underneath XAMPP. From there, you would locate a folder called conf, or CONF. This folder contains a primary Apache configuration file, which is the httpd.conf file. Before you make any changes to any of the conf files in Apache, it's very important to first make a copy. The way the copy can be made is by selecting Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste. This will create a copy of the configuration file. You can then restore this over on top of httpd.conf in case there are any mistakes made during the changes to the file. It's also important to note that under Extra, there's a series of additional files which may contain configuration parameters of interest to you. The one that we will be examining specifically in this lesson is httpd-vhosts.conf. This is where you can define virtual host definitions. But first, let's look at the primary configuration file. Two ways that you can access this file. One way is by directly accessing it here, or alternatively, going to the XAMPP control panel. We can select the config option, which is next to Apache, and select the file which is of interest. You'll notice then we've got a series of configuration directives which are of interest. The server root tells us where the primary Apache configuration is located. The listen directives tells us the port number that the Apache server will be listening to. The default is port 80. This might need to be adjusted if you have other web servers running on this particular machine. It's recommended if you change the port number that you use something under 8000. So for example, 8008, 8080, or something along those lines. A little bit further down, you can see a series of load module directives. These are the various Apache modules which are running on this particular installation. If you want to activate a module, you remove the hash sign. The hash sign makes the line seen as a comment. By removing the hash sign and then restarting Apache, you're able to reactivate Apache with the new module. If you wish to disable a module, you simply put a hash sign in front of it. This turns the line from a directive into a comment. The way to restart Apache is by going to the control panel, clicking Stop, and then Start again. Looking back at the configuration file, you'll notice there are a variety of other directives. This one identifies the server name. By default, it will be localhost. The default port is 80. If you are listening to a port other than 80, you would have to indicate that here. So for example, if we changed the listen parameter to 8008, we would need to change this to localhost 8008, and that's exactly how we would need to access it on our browser. The document root tells Apache where all of its web files are supposed to be located. The default is htdocs, which is under XAMPP. You'll notice we also have a series of directives, which includes the directory directive, and that allows Apache to configure a series of security considerations on a directory by directory level. For more information, consult the Apache documentation. Let's now have a look at the virtual host definition file and see what use that could be in our case. So, for example, let's say that we wish to define a new project. The name of the project is going to be training.unlikelysource.local. So under htdocs, we create a new project folder. In this case, it's training.unlikelysource.org. In this folder, we have a series of files which pertain to the project that we are developing. Now, let's say that we wish to simulate this on our local server. Obviously, we cannot use training.unlikelysource.org as that is a registered DNS name. However, to simulate the website, we might want to represent it as training.unlikelysource.local. The way to do that would be to first of all modify the local hosts file on this computer. The hosts file is normally located in a directory called etc or etc, which is immediately off the root. The name of the file is hosts. On Windows systems, however, it's a little bit more difficult to find. You would also need to open up an editor, such as TextEdit, gedit, or Notepad, as an administrator. The reason why this is necessary is that we must have the appropriate rights to edit a system file. Under Windows, the file is located in a rather obscure directory. It's under a folder called Windows, System32, Drivers, and then the directory etc. Under Windows, you then need to adjust for all files, and there is the hosts file. We open it up, and we are going to add a new entry, which is under Network 127. In this case, 127.0.0.2 is now going to be training.unlikelysource.local. This makes this seem as if it's an actual location. However, of course, we know that it's simply there for test purposes. We then save the file and exit. The next step is to edit the vhosts file. So we go back to our XAMPP installation. We locate Apache conf extra. We look for the httpd-vhosts.conf file. And down at the bottom, we can add a new virtual host definition. What you can do then is to simply copy one of the existing definitions, remove the two hash signs in front of each line, and make the necessary changes. It's very important that you have the exact name as specified in your hosts file. In this case, training.unlikelysource.local. The default port is 80. We then indicate the directory structure under XAMPP htdocs. In this case, it's under a folder called public. The server name is the same name that we entered in the etc hosts file. We can also create an alias and log files. We then need to save the file. We then go to our XAMPP control panel. We stop Apache, and then we restart. If there are any configuration errors, they will be indicated in red. You can then consult under Logs the error log to determine the nature of the failure. If you come into a problem that you cannot solve, the best solution is to restore from the backup file that was created earlier. We can now go to our web browser and type in http://training.unlikelysource.local, and it will respond as if it were a web server. In review, why would you want to configure Apache? The Apache settings created when installing XAMPP will be sufficient for most purposes. You would change the settings if you experience poor performance or need to make adjustments for other software packages running on the computer. You would also change the extra httpd-vhosts.conf file if you wish to make a virtual host definition. How do you configure Apache? You would locate under conf the httpd.conf file, make changes, and then restart the web server. You can also access this file under XAMPP by locating the config option next to Apache. What are the most important parameters to configure? These would include listen, load module, document root, directory directives, and include directives. What is a virtual host? This is a definition which lets you specify an alternate document root. It is used to simulate a real website. How do you configure a virtual host? First of all, add an entry to your computer's hosts file, which points to something under Network 127. Number 2, add a definition to your Apache conf extra httpd-vhosts.conf file. And number 3, restart Apache. This concludes our discussion of configuring Apache.